In 1947, the United States Army Air Force was split up for the first time since the First World War, and a military force in its own right was created. 50 years later, RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk celebrated the first half-century of the most powerful air force in the world, the United States Air Force. The Mildenhall Air Fete had been one of the air shows in the summer calendar for 22 years, but 1997 was to prove truly international, with aircraft from no less than 16 different countries thrilling the huge crowd of over 250,000. The Patrie Suisse, with their 6 F-5E Tigers, were the first of an incredible 6 national air display teams, which included the United States Air Force Thunderbirds at only their second appearance at Mildenhall at their air fete. The Northrop F-5E Tiger has been one of its greatest international sales successes, with over 20 different nations as its customers. The Swiss Air Force ordered 66 of them in 1978 under the Peace Alps program, and there were follow-on orders in 1981. The Freedom Fighter is a lightweight with both air-to-air and air-to-ground capabilities. It's also fairly economical to run, powered by 2 General Electric J85 GE21B turbojets, which give it a top speed of over 900 knots, and it can carry a very useful ordnance load of 7,000 pounds. It has a combat range of nearly 900 miles. Patrie Suisse showed just how versatile they could be with the calm orders from their leader. Remember, this is only a part-time team brought together from different squadrons for the airshow seasons. Getting to European air shows from Switzerland is no problem, as the Freedom Fighter has a ferry range of just under 2,000 miles. The F-5 was designed around the lightweight AIM-9 Sidewinder. It's one of the most agile light fighters in the world and has been used as the enemy in many a Top Gun exercise in the United States. Patrie Suisse gave an elegant display, as you can see, and are becoming well known throughout Europe as the ambassadors for the Swiss Air Force. This was their first appearance at Mildenhall. Now to Sweden. Captain Robin Nordlander of the Swedish Air Force explains the virtues of his JA-37 Saab Viggen.
Viggen is, as every Saab aircraft, I think, made for the pilot. It's smooth, it's very easy to fly for the pilot, so he can have capability to think on the combat stuff. We normally use the afterburner, full power on, full throttle, and it's pretty good acceleration. And at 250 kilometers, we take off. And just gear in and accelerate, and we'll continue pretty fast up to put the afterburner out. We have another task than the air-to-air combat, that's ground attack. But we have a little bit old armament for the ground attack, just rockets and the gun, so it's a small task. The aircraft is best maneuverability in about under 3,000 meters. That is very good. Higher altitude, the maneuverability will be less. If you have low speed and pull up too hard, you could be sitting in a super stall for quick, just 1 second. So you have to use the stick a little bit different when the speed is very low, because the risk. So we learn to not get in that flight condition. When you're a student, you fly it just straight down in the runway, and you'll be down.
And when you're more experienced?
You make a little bit more beautiful landings. You can float out and put it down like a woman.
You like that, do you?
Yeah, I like that.
Sweden was yet another first for Mildenhall. Our host unit at this historic airbase was the United States 3rd Air Force 100th Air Refueling Wing, so it was fitting to have a brief flypast from the KC-135R Stratotanker, which has become one of the most important elements in all the NATO air forces with its rapid response policy to any potential conflict around the globe. This was the moment that the huge crowd had waited for, the replacement of the venerable B-52, the Rockwell B-1B Lancer. Four General Electric F-101 turbofans with afterburners propel this supersonic intercontinental bomber into the Suffolk sky. The ground literally shook. The B-1B can fly nearly 7,500 miles without refueling, and it has a top speed of over 820 miles per hour. It has 3 bomb bays and can carry a staggering load of 84,500 pounds of conventional bombs, or, of course, it has nuclear capability. NATO forces need transport of supplies and troops. The C-17 Globemaster from McDonnell Douglas fits that bill. It can land on very rough terrain, has STOL capabilities with reverse thrust on all 4 F-117 turbofans, and it can carry 102 fully equipped troops or 110,000 pounds of cargo in its 68-foot main cabin, such as tanks or helicopters. This giant of the air faced its even bigger brother, the C-5B Galaxy, which had flown in from the States with the Thunderbirds backup crews and spares. The Galaxy is known affectionately by its crews as Fred, fantastic, ridiculous, economic disaster, but it can carry 2 battle tanks or some 363 passengers. From the heavies to the lightest aircraft in the show, these 4 tiny extra 300s in the very capable hands of the Royal Jordanian Falcons. Who said that little planes were boring? Some display. The Royal Jordanian Falcons gave way to Falcons of a very different kind. F-16 Fighting Falcons from the Royal Netherlands Air Force in its bright livery, and the Belgian Air Force. The F-16 is the most numerous fighter in the West. It's statically unstable, so relies on its central computer and electronic fly-by-wire controls to remain stable. The pilot reclines in his ACES II ejection seat at an angle of 30 degrees and flies the plane with a side stick rather than a conventional joystick. After the sale of the century, Fokker in the Netherlands built 300 aircraft under license, and Sabco in Belgium built a further 221. This superb fighter-bomber is the mainstay of NATO's frontline forces. Pilots still love the aircraft with its incredible maneuverability, high G-tolerance, heat-seeking missiles, and its Vulcan cannon, all of which mean that they can yank and bank with the best of them. At very slow speeds, the computer takes over and keeps the Fighting Falcon as steady as a rock. There's also a magnificent all-round view from the bubble canopy. If it looks right, it flies right, and the F-16 still looks very right. Later we'll see 6 F-16s in action. They are, of course, the Thunderbirds. Another Lockheed success story is the C-130 Hercules, which has been sold all over the world for many airlift duties. The YC-130 prototype first flew as far back as 1954. No newer aircraft design has proved more practical at hauling people, vehicles, equipment and supplies within a combat zone. They've served in Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, the Falklands, the Persian Gulf, Somalia and Bosnia. With its high wing, it has an unobstructed cargo compartment with an integral roll-on, roll-off rear loading ramp, which can be used either on the ground or cargo can be pushed out in the air as well. It can fly over 2,000 miles with a maximum payload, and some have been converted to air-to-air refueling, as the RAF did in the Falklands conflict. The Hercules is also the mount of the internationally famous RAF Falcons parachute display team, who, weather permitting, leap out of their aircraft into free fall before pulling their ripcords and weaving about the sky into their notorious stack formation. They use the state-of-the-art XL Cloud, which is like a flexible glider, which helps them to form these spiraling stacks. Apart from displaying at air shows, there is a serious purpose to all this. The Falcons are all members of the Parachute Training School at Bryce Norton. In turn, the RAF is responsible for training parachutists from all 3 services. The team has 15 members, and rather like the Red Arrows, they spend 3 years with the Falcons. They control their chutes with 2 toggles to turn the canopy either right or left, and they'll turn into wind for the landing. Still with the RAF, some say the greatest air display team in the world, the Red Arrows in their distinctive Red Hawks. This team always manages a few surprises each year, and 1997 was no exception. Diamond 9 is probably the oldest surviving maneuver. From this basic configuration, these other graceful shapes evolve. Red 1, Squadron Leader Simon Meade, barks out his commands for the team to split into 4 and 5. Unlike the Swiss, the Reds are a squadron in their own right, so in a war situation their Hawks would be camouflaged, armed with a 30mm cannon and Sidewinder missiles before the squadron would be fed into the UK Air Defence Forces. Each year, 3 pilots are replaced before practice begins for the next season. In 1997, the new boys were Flight Lieutenant Ian Smith, Red 2, Flight Lieutenant Gary Waterfall, Red 3, and Flight Lieutenant Andy Cuban, Red 5. All the Red pilots are at least at instructor level in the RAF, and to a man are proud to serve in this precision aerobatics team. The 2 halves of the team make incredible patterns across the summer sky before their eye-watering break. when the synchro pair start a series of death-defying crossovers with a closing speed of some 700 knots. Rollbacks has always been one of my favourite manoeuvres. The Reds always return to Diamond 9 before their spectacular parasol break. An old adversary is the Russian MiG29 Fulcrum, but this one is part of Germany's Air Force. The MiG29, like the F-16, was designed as a light fighter, and both are extremely agile, high-performance dogfighters. And they've both been sold to many other nations. Flying controls are mainly conventional rather than fly-by-wire, but the MiG-29 is extremely stable, agile, and will take a lot of stick in combat. It carries 6 underwing missiles and a 30mm cannon. For close-up work, there's a helmet-mounted sight which senses the pilot's head position before he fires his homing missiles. In other words, he just looks and shoots. Donald Douglas F-15 Eagle has been the United States Air Force frontline fighter since the 1970s. This one had a very special mission, as we'll see later. Training is vital in any Air Force. This is the Pilatus PC7, the forerunner of the PC9, which was in fierce competition with the short Tucano for the contract to replace the RAF's jet provosts. The Tucano won that battle, but the Royal Netherlands Air Force stuck with Pilatus. New pilots need to get the feel of a jet aircraft before going onto the front line, so a turboprop was found to be the answer. By 1985, Pilatus offered the option of 2 Martin Baker ejector seats, and by 1994, some 500 aircraft have been sold to many of the smaller air forces around the world. Pratt & Whitney provide the power, giving a maximum cruising speed of 256 miles an hour, a range of 746 miles, and as you can see, the aircraft is fully aerobatic, with G limits of -3 to +6 at normal takeoff weights. Pilatus always make robust, well-engineered planes, and the PC7 is no exception. One of the main attractions in this anniversary show was the only European appearance of the United States Air Demonstration Squadron, Thunderbirds, who flew lock, stock and barrel all the way from America for the Mildenhall crowd, as Captain Jack Miller explains.
Well, typically when we leave from the United States, this time we left our home base in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we did a show at Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland, which is near D.C. And traveling over here, the support folks all went in a C-5 Galaxy, traveled over, and then the actual F-16 aircraft, all 8 of them, actually traveled with air refueling, doing 7 air refuelings en route, and came down here to England, and we're ready to do a show.
Thunderbirds fly the F-16Cs, and their takeoff pattern is unusual. The pattern of 4, led by team leader Lieutenant Colonel Ronald Mumm, who flies number 1 and commands no less than 140 in his squadron. The lead solo F-16 is flown by Major Matt McLeskey in number 5, who flew more than 120 combat hours in the Gulf War in the A-10 tank buster. He's in his 2nd year with Thunderbirds. The third element is opposing solo pilot Major Mark Arlinghouse in his 1st season with the team.
The F-16 is a fantastic aircraft for air demonstrations. In the Thunderbirds history, we've flown 6 aircraft, and at one time we flew the T-38, which was not a frontline fighter, but we're proud to say that we're back flying a frontline fighter again, and it is just a phenomenal aircraft, not only for fighting aircraft, but for an air demonstration. It handles incredibly, and all the pilots are excited to fly it during any demonstration.
Thunderbirds were officially recognized in May 1953, flying F-84 Thunderjets, and they moved to their current base at Nellis 3 years later with the Super Sabre. From 1969 to 73, they used the F-4E Phantom II. I personally saw one of them crash at an air show at Dulles. The team then went on to the more agile TE-38 Talon before taking delivery of the F-16A early in 1983.
Well, the Thunderbird aircraft are the same F-16s that you'll see at any fighter wing in the United States Air Force. Our aircraft can be converted in 72 hours if need be, but primary role is the demonstration for shows around the United States and around the world.
Officers assigned to Thunderbirds serve 2 years with the squadron, while enlisted corps serve 3 to 4, which means that nearly 50% are replaced each year to provide a constant mix of experience. After the first day of this 2-day airshow at Mildenhall, Thunderbirds were to fly the return trip to the United States for more demonstrations to mark the 50th anniversary of the United States Air Force.
It is an incredibly big event. I'm personally very proud to be in the Air Force and on the Thunderbirds in the year of the 50th anniversary, because it's really showing a culmination of 50 years of air power, and to have the opportunity to share this is just immense, because everybody is really enjoying this, and we're really proud to be a part of the 50th anniversary.
So let's look back at those 50 years when the World War II warhorse, the B-17, was being phased out of the United States Army Air Force, which had expanded after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and America's entry into the European conflict, culminating in 80,000 aircraft and nearly 2.5 million personnel. The superb B-51 Mustang had been the B-17's little friend, and the King Cobras had played their part in Russia and the Far East. In fact, this B-17 is kept going by Ellie Salingbo's B-17 Preservation, founded by the late Ted White as a memorial to the 78,000 American airmen who lost their lives serving in the Army Air Force during the war. As usual, it was flown by Captain Keith Sissons. By the last year of the war, the quality and quantity of Army Air Force aircraft and aircrew dominated the Pacific and European skies, literally paralyzing the enemy's economies, culminating in the dropping of the first atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After demobilization, and with such an outstanding record, the United States Air Force became a force in its own right. It won its independence on September the 18th, 1947, with the oncoming of the jet age. The Soviet-backed invasion of South Korea by communist North Korea drew the new United States Air Force into a brutal 3-year conflict. Its new F-86 Sabre jet fighters were the frontline aircraft of the time. That war ended in 1953, and for the next 4 decades, the United States Air Force provided the cornerstone of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization against the communist-dominated Warsaw Pact. By the 1970s, the USAF tried to modernize its aircraft with new weapon systems, for example, the A-10 Thunderbolt II tank buster, the F-15 and F-16, while the Soviets were producing more and more sophisticated aircraft in alarming numbers, especially in Eastern Europe. But a decade earlier, the horrendous Vietnam War had virtually bled the American military coffers dry. As in all these things, the United States Air Force had to be funded, and it was. With war becoming more and more electronic, billions of dollars were plowed into more speed, agility, and less sight, as the word stealth crept into the military vocabulary. 50 years on, the B-2 Spirit, the shape of the modern bomber, was flown from the United States for its first visit to Mildenhall in Europe. The B-2 was the first stealth bomber in the world, virtually invisible to enemy radar. The flying wing design from Northrop is an achievement in itself, but the honeycomb structure and state-of-the-art composites are truly revolutionary. But revolution of this magnitude costs a lot of money in development and manufacture. Each aircraft costs a staggering $2,220 million apiece. Originally, the United States Air Force expected to receive 132, but the more likely figure is somewhere around 30. Now the turn of the French with their Sepcat Jaguar E's. The Jaguar was the result of an Anglo-French agreement as far back as 1965 to produce a trainer and light attack aircraft for limited wars. But what emerged was a very tough aircraft that has seen pretty big wars, such as the Gulf and Bosnia, even though it's older than most of its pilots. Amazingly, the Jaguar's wingspan is less than a Spitfire, but its bomb load can be almost as heavy as 2 Spitfires. The Jaguar E, for école or school, is the Armée de l'Air's 2-seater trainer version for conversion onto the single-seater, which can carry a multitude of weapons and stores on its pylons for its ground attack role. It's powered by two Rolls-Royce Ardor turbofans, giving it a top speed of just over 1,000 miles an hour, and it can climb to 30,000 feet in 1.5 minutes. No European airshow is complete without the Patrie de France, who fly with their usual Gallic flair in their Dassault Dornier Alpha jets, which were born in 1973. The Armée de l'Air used them as an interim trainer before going on to the Mirage. In their dashing display, these aircraft and pilots will be subjected to over 9G, which means that the pilot will become 9 times his own weight. To counteract this, they all wear G-suits to keep the blood flowing to the brain so as not to black out. It is a dazzling combination of loops, rolls, twinkle rolls, and breathtaking crossovers. Patrie de France, as ever, at their brilliant best. This is what many of the Armée de l'Air Alpha Jet pilots will convert to, the Dassault Mirage 2000, the third generation of a great lineage. Dassault always favored the Delta design for stability at low speed and agility at high speed. The Mirage 2000 is a computer-controlled fly-by-wire fighter, fitted with leading-edge slats which deploy automatically during combat maneuvers. It's armed with two 30mm cannons for close work and a variety of underslung missiles for more long-range work. It's defended by the Thompson CSF servo radar warning receiver and has antennas in the fin and outer wings which provide a threat display in the glass cockpit. ECM jammers are mounted in the tailcone bullet fairing and fin. Top speed is 1,453 miles an hour, and the Mirage 2000 will certainly be with the Armée de l'Air well into the millennium. This is Nimrod, or the Prowler, which is used by the RAF for anti-submarine warfare. It's an adaptation of the de Havilland Comet, which was the world's first jet airliner. It can drop mines, nuclear depth charges, homing torpedoes or bombs from its large bomb bay, or you can hang sidewinders or harpoon anti-shipping missiles on its underwing pylons. The Prowler can stay in the air for 12 hours at a time, and it can loiter by cutting 2 of its 4 engines and flying on the remaining 2. Nimrod can be refueled in the air, so as long as you don't run out of oil, theoretically, you could stay up indefinitely. The British have always been great innovators, and aviation is no exception. The Sea Harrier and Harrier are the end product of a dream of controlling a fighting aircraft from the hover to high-speed flight. The Americans, French and Russians all tried and failed to make a viable V-STOL fighter. It was really thanks to Rolls-Royce that the dream became reality, as the secret is in the single Pegasus engine pushing its power into 4 swiveling nozzles, which distribute that power evenly, which in turn allows the aircraft to rise vertically, to hover, to turn on its own axis, and convert into conventional flight. At Mildenhall, we had a unique combination of 2 Sea Harriers and the RAF GR7 Harrier flown by Flight Lieutenant Clive Soff. Today's Harriers are a very different beast from the original design of 30 years ago. It carries 5 times the load, flies further, has a full kit of modern avionics, and more important still, is much easier to fly than its prototype, the Kestrel. It's a question of whatever you can do, I can do better, with that rivalry between the Navy and the RAF. The Harrier really made its mark for the first time in the Falklands War, where viving was developed into an art form. By swiveling the nozzles in flight, the aircraft can be slowed down dramatically, making the enemy on your tail overshoot, with disastrous consequences. The Harrier also saw action in the Gulf and has been such a successful design that the American Marines are using the more powerful AV series built under license in the States. Harrier will be around for a long time to come. The Panavia Tornado has been the most significant strike attack aircraft in NATO since it entered service in 1982. Its ability to attack targets by day or by night in all weathers added a new dimension to NATO's capabilities. The UK, France and Germany all fly this extraordinary swing-wing aircraft. But this is the RAF version, the F3, flown by Flight Lieutenant Pete Hackett with his navigator, Flight Lieutenant Al Taylor from 25 Squadron, based at RAF Leeming. The Tornado is powered by twin turbo-union engines developing over 16,000 pounds of thrust each, giving it a maximum speed of 1,454 miles an hour, or Mach 2.2. It's armed with a 27mm gun, 4 Skyflash and 4 Sidewinder missiles, which are to be replaced by AMRAAMs. Design of the MRCA, or Multi-Role Combat Aircraft, was started in 1968, and it was a joint project between Germany, Italy and Great Britain. Over the decades, it's been radically updated, and it is an incredibly stable weapons platform, especially at low level in turbulent air, making sure that its crew have a fairly comfortable ride. As was proved in the Gulf War, the aircraft is capable of coming in low and fast onto its target and delivering its load with pinpoint accuracy. Its swing wings ensure that Tornado can fly at almost any value, and reverse thrust on landing gives it very efficient stopping power. Within a month of the new United States Air Force on October the 14th, 1947, test pilot Chuck Yeager flew the Bell X-1 faster than the speed of sound. 50 years on, the Mildenhall crowd saw an aircraft of a very different kind. The world's first stealth fighter, the F-117 Nighthawk, again flown across the Atlantic for this special anniversary. Pilot Dave Lobdell takes up the story.
Initially, we staged out of Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. We launched out of there, joined up with a KC-10 tanker, and simply flew a formation off the tanker all the way over to England. And as needed, we just went underneath and let them hook up and squirt us a couple thousand pounds of gas, and we go back, hang on the wing for about a half hour, 2 hours, and go back, get some more gas, and just keep doing that until you get here. Our primary abilities we can't really show anyone because there aren't any radar sets out there, and hopefully there aren't. So what we just show is actually the fact that the F-117 is a very dynamic aircraft and can handle, it's very agile, and it performs as most fighters do. In fact, we try not to be stealthy when we're flying around under air traffic control because we don't want anyone else to run into us, so we have to let them know where we are. If you notice on the sides of the airplane, we actually have radar cross-section enhancers that enhances our radar return. Also, when we stick our antennas out, we have a standard IFF code that, as assigned by air traffic control, will be squawking that so that they can pick up our airspeed or altitude and vector traffic away from us as necessary.
So you use a transponder just like any normal aircraft, but of course as far as primary radar, these devices actually enhance the aircraft's radar image, is that right?
Correct, sir. Absolutely.
How do they do that?
Well, there you stick them on the side there. It's just like a reflector, like a piece of aluminum foil out there that just enhances our radar reflectivity.
So do you just turn those on when you're not flying stealth? Is that the idea?
Actually, no, sir. They're just bolted onto the side, and we leave them on. In the event of wartime, we'll take them off. Well, one of the interesting things about the airplane is the intake and the interesting shape of the exhaust. Together they combine for a slight thrust reduction, so our takeoff rolls tend to take around 4,000 to 5,000 feet and then increase at higher pressure altitudes. So again, throttles up, slowly accelerate compared to other fighters, and then approaching our rotation speed, which is fairly high, around 170, 180 knots, we'll rotate, and off we go. Gear handle comes up, there's no flaps, so that makes the checklist a little easier. It's designed to go after high-value, highly defended targets, fixed targets like concrete bunkers, command posts, communication nodes, etc. So we go into the high-threat envelope, destroy like communication nodes or command and control nodes so that the rest of the airplanes can get in untouched. Top speed is high subsonic. High subsonic. We don't go supersonic because if nobody can see, you don't need to go fast. We operate at a variety of altitudes, and the tactics and the threat will determine what altitude we ingress at. We carry a variety of weapons, primarily 2 laser-guided bombs. Solely with smart bombs, because we only carry 2. It's not like we can go off and drop a string of 6 bombs. So we carry 2 smart bombs, we hit what we aim for, and we go home. If it's a daytime pattern, like some of our training missions, we'll initially go into the overhead at 300 knots, pitch out, lower the gear, maintain around 195 knots around the final turn, and then slow to on speed, which is anywhere from 150 to 160 knots, and then crossing the overrun, we'll pull the power back, flare, and touch it down nice as you please.
The F-117 Nighthawk. As a fitting finale to this anniversary show, who better to round off a staggering 2 days at RAF Mildenhall than the biggest of all the display teams, and the most flamboyant, the Italian team Frecce Tricolore. They are a squadron in their own right, the 313th Aerobatic Squadron of the Italian Air Force, or Aeronautica Militare. Their name, Frecce Tricolore, literally translates into 3 coloured arrows, which refers to their smoke trails coloured in the red, green and white of the Italian national flag. This colourful 10-man team fly the Ermaki MB339A, a subsonic 2-seat attack trainer which has been sold to many countries, including Argentina, who used them in anger against the RAF in the Falklands War. They're all equipped with 2 Seacam Martin Baker 00 ejection seats, and they're powered by a Piaggio-built Rolls-Royce Viper for the reliability needed for any display team. The Viper pushes the MB339 along at 500 miles per hour and gives the aircraft a combat radius of about 370 miles. Unlike the Red Arrows, who change 3 of the team every year, Frecce Tricolore stay together as a squadron, usually for many years, until a member either retires or is moved on to other duties in the Italian Air Force. The thinking behind this is that the continuity allows them to do many more daring manoeuvres than any of the other national teams. time of conflict, the squadron can be quickly turned round into battle readiness, just as the Reds and the Thunderbirds can. The most difficult job is the solo flyer, who has to be coordinated into the other two halves of the team with some breathtaking near misses and crossovers, with closing speeds approaching 650 miles an hour. The aircraft can be armed with a variety of weapons and stores of up to 4,000 pounds in weight on 6 hardpoints. You can have 2 30mm cannon pods, or 2 rocket launchers with 2 drop tanks, or a selection of AIM and Sidewinder missiles. Frecce Tricolore was formed as a team way back in 1961 on the orders of the Italian government to show the world what the Italian Air Force was made of. Apart from their unfortunate crash at Ramstein, the team has risen in stature for its imagination, flair, and wonderful Italian humour. As NATO forces continue to respond to trouble anywhere in the world, we all join the 16 nations represented here at Mildenhall in wishing the United States Air Force every success for their position of responsibility for the next 50 years.